Hello and welcome to Anime Kiwi. This week we're going to be talking about the last two episodes of Megazone 23. I'm Mike.
Is this a nightmare? Am I in a nightmare? Are you naked right now?
I am, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm naked too.
That was a joke. We're talking about the first 6 episodes of Monster.
Alrighty.
What are your thoughts on this from these first 6?
I think it's pretty good so far. I don't think it's amazing, but you know, it's pretty solid. But you know, I'm not one of those weirdos that thinks everything I watch has to be incredible or amazing. Something being good is more than enough.
Yeah.
Like I would like if somebody recommended this show to me and I watched these first 6 episodes, because you know, I pretty typically give a show about 6 or 7 episodes before I decide whether or not I'm going to stick with it. And if this was on my own time, I'd probably just keep watching it. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, it's a good series. I don't remember how much. I think this might cover like the first volume and a half of the comic, maybe 2 volumes. But there's a lot of it still left. Let's see, how many episodes are there here? There's 74 episodes, and I don't think there's any filler ones or any. There's definitely no recaps, but I'm pretty sure it's all pretty tightly paced through this adaptation.
Yeah, if it maintains this pacing throughout, then I would have no problem watching, you know, all 70 of the episodes or whatever. I think that something that's kind of stood out to me so far is that the pacing of the show, at least so far, it's a fairly cinematic pacing, as in, you know, like, it's not exactly like a lot of TV shows have more room to breathe, so they kind of let moments linger a bit, particularly with like Kids on the Slope or whatever. But this show so far is like pretty much like on the dot of like a standard, like more cinematic pacing, which is, you know, definitely not a bad thing because they pull it off quite well. Yeah. The only criticism I have so far, that like major criticism at least, is that like the writing's a bit exposition-y. Like it's somebody kind of shoehorning in very like obviously plot-related dialogue, just like spelling it out for the audience, like, you know, telling rather than showing, I guess.
Do you have examples of when this happened?
Like right as the show begins, like, you know, they're talking about, you know, I'm glad that we got to saw the, you know, the best surgeon in the hospital do his work, and they're basically just staying there talking about how great he is rather than, you know, showing him being a good surgeon or something.
Yeah.
And there's another time where like he's speaking to the director of the hospital, and the director's just kind of outright explaining the plot, even though like in the form of dialogue, but it's fairly obviously just trying to get the plot out there. But I don't necessarily think like that is a fairly major criticism, I think, but it's also a case of that when you're doing something this tightly paced, sometimes you just kind of have to get that plot out there as quickly as you can, which it can feel a bit shoehorned, but otherwise I think it's kind of a trade-off, I guess. If something's a bit more like lightly paced, you might not have to get the exposition out so quickly, but because this is very tightly paced, they need to get it out there quite quickly.
Especially since it's not a show about him doctoring. This stuff was in service of expanding his character and the kind of person he is, more so than showing him doing the doctor thing.
Yeah, I guess like the first 3 or 4 episodes are pretty much like a fairly strict character study of Tenma, and then it kind of opens up from there. Which I think like if this was a movie rather than this 70 episode TV show or whatever, I think this would, you know, it would basically be a character study movie, but because they got more time to explore other ideas, they can kind of shift on to, I guess, like after episode 4 or something, the show becomes a bit more of like a neo-noir sort of story.
Kind of. There's a lot of psychological thriller stuff in there too, if I remember correctly. It's been almost 10 years, I think, since I read the comics, so I don't remember details explicitly. But when I was watching these things, like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. Oh yeah, things end bad for him, don't they?
Yeah, I guess like neo-noir and like psychological thriller, there's a lot of crossover with those genres these days, at least.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess let's get into the episodes themselves. The first one introduces us to Dr. Kenzo Tenma, who is a Japanese neurosurgeon working in Dusseldorf, or working in Germany somewhere, Western Germany, because this is after the time skip in, was it episode 2? Episode 3?
Yeah,
Episode
it's
3 was
the
time
end
skip.
of beginning of episode 3 is when they skip over 9 years.
Yeah, and that the Cold War, the Berlin Wall falls in that period, right?
Yeah, I think the wall fell in 91 or something. I think the show starts like around there.
Yeah, the show starts when it's still up because they're making a big deal about there being a couple defectors from East Germany coming into town.
Which, you'd be pretty divided down like capitalist and communist lines back then.
Yeah, so we see Dr. Tenma coming out of surgery on a famous opera singer, and it turns out later that the surgery was done in place of a Turkish construction worker who also had some problems, and they got it seemed like the third string surgeon doing that job, because every time they said his name, it was the patient died. But we kind of see Tenma start to wrestle with triage stuff, I guess, whether somebody needs the operation more versus whether they are famous enough to be able to get special treatment, and he doesn't care for that.
Yeah, like his position in the hospital is like as the most skilled physician, so his role in the triage of patients is fairly important, but the director keeps screwing him around through politics and stuff.
Yeah, this episode especially was pretty heavy. This one and the next one were super heavy on the hospital politics and how kind of fucked in the head the hospital director was. He's kind of a giant dickwad.
Yeah, like when you've got somebody in charge of essentially taking care of people and all they care about is prestige and like the profit motive, then, it leads to bad outcomes for people.
Yeah. But anyway, so Dr. Tenma's having conscience problems about the surgery. Meanwhile, we're meeting the director's daughter, who happens to be Tenma's fiance, and that goes wrong for him too. But fast forward a little bit, and we hear about the defectors that we talked about, and that they have a set of twins. How do you refer to twins? I feel if I say a set of twins, it means there's more than one grouping of twins. Okay. Yeah, so there's two. There's Johann and Anna. But later on, the twins are brought into the hospital. Their parents were murdered, and Johann was shot in the head, and Anna seems to be in a state of advanced psychological shock. And the episode basically ends on Tenma going into surgery on Johann, but the director calling him out because the mayor of Dusseldorf had a heart attack or an embolism or something. I forget what it was.
Yeah, it's like a brain embolism or something. But it's kind of a side element, but I kind of feel like I should point out that the bullet wound on Johann kind of comes from an upward trajectory. The bullet wound is in the top of his head, which is something to bear in mind, I think.
Yeah, I forget a lot of the details regarding that.
Yeah, because it kind of stuck out in my mind because I was thinking about, what could have happened to that kid or whatever, and I kind of ruled out a possible suicide attempt because because of the trajectory of the bullet.
Yeah, that's a reasonable assertion to make. But anyways, so Tenma defies the director and goes to work on Johann instead of the mayor. And that's the end of episode 1, basically. Did you try the English dub at all for this?
I kind of flipped back and forth because I was doing some other stuff while the show was on. So if I needed to do something at the same time as watching the show, I'd have the English dub on. Whereas if I was able to, dedicate my attention to the show, I would just switch it back to Japanese.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of the dub?
I find that the dub it's a pretty standard anime dub, I think. It's
it's serviceable.
Like the direction on the Tenma in particular is very breathy. He's a lot of like whenever somebody like his was like the anime were, he's doing that constantly, and it's. I think the Japanese actor is a lot better. I think the Japanese cast in particular is just tighter and better acted.
Yeah, I think I agree that's a lot better. Any thoughts on the first episode?
It's kind of hard to get an idea of what the show is going to be by the end of this first episode, and that kind of continues on for a good up until like the fourth. Something I consider quite a positive thing about the show is that you kind of don't know what direction it's going in. Like it could end up anywhere. I find unpredictability in storytelling, especially these days, is quite rare. So I always appreciate something where I don't know where it's headed, and I get that sense quite strong from the first episode. But something that stood out, and I mentioned this to you off air, is that the sound design in this show can be pretty intense.
It's super, super good.
Yeah, like it's like a combination of the soundtrack itself, as in the music, and kind of sound design. It's like trying to set the mood with this like very like dissonant and strange sounding like musicality that the show has.
Yeah.
I think that without this like auditory element, I guess, I think this story kind of would be missing a lot. I think, you know, if all you have access to is the manga, which is what this is adapted from, right?
Yeah, which does have the sound effects like any comic would. So it's not completely absent; it's just different.
Like, but without being able to actually hear it, you know, the soundtrack in general is very good and very unusual. Like, I was talking to you a couple of days ago about how I couldn't even think of a genre to put the opening titles into, like the music. It sounds like there's elements of like industrial music as well as like ambient and choral music and all sorts of stuff.
Super weird.
Yeah, but in a really good way.
Maybe it leads into the series itself is kind of hard to quantify with a single genre title.
Yeah, definitely. This show in general kind of defies a lot of categorization. It's kind of stands on its own in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's everything with the first episode.
Yeah. So episode 2, we see the fallout from Dr. Tenma's decision. He's able to save Johan, but the mayor dies, and the director of the hospital is not happy about that. The person, of course, doing the surgery on the mayor was
like Dr. Goya or something?
Yeah, Dr. Boyer.
Goya, you know.
Yeah, it was the guy who did the surgery on the Turkish worker who died. So basically, that surgeon seems kind of like a hack, and that Dr. Tenma is the only worthwhile, like, big doctor at this place.
Well, that that or his skill is like so unusual that, you know, a regular doctor is kind of not even in his league.
Yeah, that could be it. But basically, they're at a party for something, and they call up the head of neurosurgery. So Tenma starts to go up there, and the director's like, oh no, that's not you anymore. Dr. Boyer's the head of neurosurgery now. And then he basically tells Tenma that, oh yeah, you're not the head of neurosurgery anymore, but your research is on hold, and I'm going to make sure you can't get a job anywhere else. And also, his fiancée breaks up with him. So Tenma's heading rapidly towards rock bottom here for doing what he seemed to think was the right thing.
And like this is kind of precisely what I mean by the show's more cinematic pacing, because this is like the character's low point, you know, and this is kind of where you would be at a midpoint roughly in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're at that point in the second episode, and it got there really fast.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like the very brisk pacing I kind of appreciate, just because it seems like it's trying to get through a lot of stuff rather than just a case of it trying to rush. It's got a lot of stuff to cover, really.
Mm-hmm. So, in the wake of this, Tenma finds that the only thing he has left, basically, is to take care of Johan and Anna, who he saved. But the hospital director gets the idea of putting the twins together and having a media appearance for them, which turns out very badly. I think Johan woke up and said something, I forget what, but Anna started freaking the shit out, and Tenma went up to say, hey, what's the deal here? And they said, oh, you're not taking care of these guys anymore. So Tenma is properly rock bottom now, and he tells, after this he is in the room with Johan, and he kind of mutters that he wishes Director Heinemann was dead.
Well, he doesn't really mutter it. He's more like yelling it.
He does yell it, but he doesn't think that anyone's hearing him. He's saying it to himself.
Yeah. Because he doesn't think Johan is conscious.
Right.
Which, like, kind of makes sense because Johan isn't said or moved or done anything. So, you can kind of see where this might lead.
Yeah. There was some stuff about the person investigating the case of the murdered parents to try and get any information out of Anna. And she just keeps saying, kill me, doesn't she?
Yeah. It's kind of unclear because in the dub version, she just says kill instead of kill me. But if you switch to...
That's what the Japanese is saying. She's just saying kill. So I'm not sure if that's a subtitle error.
At other times, the subtitles say kill me, but she's saying the same words. So yeah. I don't know Japanese very well, so I don't know if that's like just a mistranslation or something.
Yeah, she's just saying koroshite, which is like asking somebody to kill.
Then I guess she is saying kill me.
But they're trying to get her to remember anything, which she seems completely amnesiac at this point. But then we cut away a little bit and we discover the two doctors who did the surgery on the mayor were dead, and also Tenma's ex-fiancé finds her dad, the director, dead in the same way. And that's the end of this episode.
See, man, this show moves really, really fast.
It does.
I was kind of thinking, like, in any other show, that whole element of the hospital politics and him being demoted or whatever, they'd probably dedicate like 10 episodes to that or something, and it would be like this major drawn-out plot point. But they just, it's out there, you see him dealing with the fallout of that, and then the next plot point hits, they don't linger on anything for very long.
Yeah, they got better stuff to talk about than hospital politics.
Yeah, man. Lots of interesting stuff to cover. Like, one of the things I mentioned to you when I was watching the episodes is that it feels like really good to see properly nuanced storytelling again after watching Chihaya Furu. Like, this show has things to say about stuff, and it has a really efficient way of exploring these ideas, getting through them really fast, but kind of indicating what it needs to the viewer. Like, I'm almost identifying this show with this show on a personal level because I'm all about brutal efficiency as well. So the show is speaking to me on a personal level.
And it helps that at least Dr. Tenma, we haven't seen too much other regular characters. We meet a new one in episode 3, but for the time being, Tenma is the only main character. But he's pretty well written. One of the things that the guy who made the series seems to like from the 3... I think I've read 3 things by him at this point, is he likes the more or less normal guy with some sort of sense of conscience who just kind of gets fucked real hard and ends up being some insane conspiracy thing.
Yeah, it like the thing that stood out to me is, I often go on about the generic anime protagonist, and this guy is an intelligent and like confident person who has a sense of morality, and he's a grown adult with a good high level profession. He's like, if you're gonna have a male protagonist, this is like the opposite of a generic anime protagonist.
Yeah, because there's this one that happened. There's one that's ongoing called Billy Bat. That's about like, he's a comic artist in America. It's in like the 40s, I want to say. He's making like a Dick Tracy type thing. And he finds out that he subliminally plagiarized that character. And he goes to Japan to try and make good with the person he took it from. And then he gets thrust into some whole weird thing there.
Is this supposedly a term for that when you like subliminally plagiarize something. It's like cryptomnesia or something.
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't read the whole thing yet, so I'm not sure how much of that is actually what it is. But that's like the base plot they present you with. And there's Pluto, which is an adaptation of an Astro Boy arc, which is in his adaptation framed as a robot police officer digging through a conspiracy about a bunch of murders, or a bunch of murders of high profile good boy robots.
Wait, you said robot cop?
Yeah, he's a robot.
He's a RoboCop,
No, he's a robot cop. Robot police officer.
but he's robotic. He's a robotic police officer. He's a robot cop, or perhaps a RoboCop for short.
Is RoboCop really a robot?
No, he's more of a cyborg.
Cybocop.
I'd watch that.
That doesn't sound like a great movie. I'm not going to watch it.
It sounds like a sci-fi original.
I do like a sci-fi original movie.
Well, here we go. I looked up cryptomnesia just to see if I was full of shit. And it says, cryptomnesia occurs when a forgotten memory returns without it being recognized as such by the subject, who believes it is something new and original. It is a memory bias where a person may falsely recall generating a thought, an idea, a song, or a joke, not deliberately engaging in plagiarism, but rather experiencing a memory as if it were a new inspiration. So there you go. Huh. There's your new word a day calendar, courtesy of Cat Data.
I'll definitely use that one every day.
There's also an album called Cryptomnesia by the El Grupo Nuevo de Omar Rodriguez Lopez.
Those were a lot of sounds you said.
Who I believe is the lead guitarist for the Mars Volta.
Oh, so that's right up your alley, isn't it?
Yeah, I quite like the Mars Volta. It's a good band.
Anyway, shall we get to episode 3, Murder Case?
Sure.
Tenma is informed that the director and those 2 doctors are dead, and he seems to be one of the lead suspects because he has the most to gain from it. So he gets to the hospital after learning this, and he learns that the twins are gone.
He's very distressed by that fact.
This is when we meet a guy who will be a recurring character, Inspector Lung. I'm pretty sure he goes through most of the series. He's pretty important with his weird mind typing thing.
He seems like he's got Asperger's or something.
Something like that. He has his way of remembering things. But I guess anyone with that good of memory has other problems to make up for having that good of a memory, probably.
Yeah, probably. It's kind of interesting, though. Like, he was talking about how he types out what a person's saying as like a memory technique, kind of thinking like his brain is a hard drive, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, because I can touch type and I know where all the keys are just by memory on a keyboard, like I started kind of picturing what he was saying as me typing on a keyboard, and it actually kind of does work as a memory technique.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of effective. If you know where all the keys on a keyboard are, I recommend trying it out. It's kind of interesting.
That's interesting. But we learn that the doctors were killed by means of some poisoned Werther's originals. Oh, hold on a second, got a text.
Is it some thirsty boys?
No, it's my girlfriend informing me she found a video on how to make eggs Benedict in the sous vide.
Well, let us know. How do you do it?
You probably sous vide the eggs in a bag so that you get some perfect poached eggs, and then you can sous vide the hollandaise sauce. And I'm pretty sure you have to put it in a whipping siphon to get it the right consistency, which I don't have a whipping siphon, so I probably can't do that part.
I don't even have one of those sous vide things.
They're pretty great. I made meatloaf in it last night, and it was kind of perfect. The best thing about a sous vide is that basically any meat you put in there makes its own sauce. So you just put it in a pan for a little bit with a little bit of cornstarch, and you have basically a 5-minute gravy to go with just about any dish.
That does sound pretty good.
It's pretty good. I made some pretty dope-ass burgers in one last week.
What do you use to sear? Do you use like a blowtorch or something?
You just get a pan really hot. For the burgers, I went out to the barbecue and I got it as hot as I could, and I just put them on there for like a minute each side. Most stuff I put in a pan. The meatloaf I put under the broiler for a couple minutes.
I think I've only got an electric oven, so I'd have to use like the grill or something to get a really good sear quite quickly.
Yeah, you can get a propane torch, and they make an attachment for it that's basically a handheld broiler.
Yeah, I've seen one of those things.
Yeah.
I think the a kind of annoying thing, because I want to get into that sous vide stuff, is just it'd be really expensive to set up just because I don't have a lot of money and I'd have to buy all that equipment.
Yeah, well, the actual machine itself is the only expensive part. That's probably about 200, but after that, it's water in a food grade plastic bin, which is probably like 20.
It's idiot-proof cooking. That's the most compelling thing about it.
Pretty much. You can leave it in there too long, and that'll affect the texture of it. But
even then, like a good sear would probably fix that.
well, it'll affect the internal texture of it.
Well, that's true, yeah. The fat starts to break down after a certain period, but that's like after like an entire day it would take.
Depending on the meat.
Yeah, depending on the meat, like a steak or something.
If it's ground beef, you don't want to leave it in there for more than like 5 hours or something.
Yeah, but like it's not a case of, you might burn something on a pan or something if you leave it on there for a minute too long. Whereas this with sous vide, it's a case of if you left it in there for multiple hours too long.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of hard to screw up.
Yeah. As long as you sear before and after, it's probably going to be pretty good. The searing before is the important part.
I've never heard of it being done that way.
Because you get the caramelization reactions that way, and if you sear it before, the sear will seal in more of the juices when you're sous videing it, and also it's hard. You won't overcook it at all by searing before, and the after sear is just to restore the crispness from the beginning.
Well, I've heard from chefs that the whole searing to seal in the juices is actually a myth, and it still just leaks out anyway.
You still get the caramelization reactions, the flavors from that.
Yeah, the Maillard reaction, but you get that after anyway. Like if you did the sear after.
But you have to be more careful with the after sear because the meat is perfectly cooked at that point, so you don't want to overcook it after you've already gotten it perfect.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point.
Yeah, so if you do the sear before, you just have to crisp it up again after. You don't have to worry about getting the crust to begin with. Except for lamb, you don't want to do that for lamb.
This just randomly became a cooking podcast, didn't it? Can't remember the last time I've had ham. Lamb, I mean.
Sheep. Bah. Apparently, if you do that for lamb, it ends up being like mutton. So in case... I guess if you like mutton, that's fine, but...
I don't even know if I like mutton.
I don't think I've ever had mutton. I've only had spring lamb.
I'll have to try it one day.
Yeah. But anyways, they were killed by means of poisoned Werther's originals, which we saw in the last episode. They were stealing from thought to be unconscious Johann, who had gotten them as gifts from the adoring public.
Do you think we're being subtle with this?
With what?
With, Johann thought to be
I mean,
unconscious?
We're gonna talk about it this episode, so...
But it could be split in half.
It could be split in half. But, I mean, he's the main antagonist of the series, so...
Yeah, might as well get that out there.
Yeah, it had a muscle relaxant in it, so they kind of... you suffocate with that, right? Because your diaphragm can't breathe you?
Yeah, you can't breathe because the muscles in your, that expand your lungs just stop working.
But anyways, so this is... The fact that it happened like this to those people is what makes Lung and the other inspector think that Tenma might have done it. Because as we learn, with the time skip happens here, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's nine years later, I think. Yeah, 9-year time skip to 1995. Tenma has become the chief of surgery at the hospital.
Well, they reveal before the time skip that the new director is performance oriented, so he just promotes him to chief of staff. I mean, like surgery immediately.
Yeah, because the new chairman seems to... I don't think they touch on too much, but the chairman doesn't seem to be a dickbag like the other one. He just wants to run a hospital good.
Yeah, he just says he's performance oriented, and that's all we kind of get from him, really.
Yeah. I think before the time skip, we also see Eva try and get back with Tenma, but he says no, basically. Because why would you?
Yeah. She's basically just a what would you call it? Like a like
Gold
an
digger?
ambitious marrier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She wants to marry ambitiously.
Yeah. But anyways, now we get the time skip, and Tenma is doing very well as chief of surgery. And he says that the operation on Johan reminded him basically of why he got into doctoring. He said that he got kind of sidetracked, like a lot of doctors do, with furthering their research and stuff, but that he's now back to doing what he wanted to do and helping people, saving lives.
Oh, as he keeps repeating that, like every life is equal.
Yeah.
Every life has equal weight or something. I think he says.
Yeah, and they were saying in the first episode, the bad people were saying that all people aren't equal. So that kind of is a direct contrast between them and Tenma.
Yeah, so I think it's an important focal point for the show, like that phrase specifically, because it's kind of thematically what the show is exploring, I guess. The idea of equality in life.
Yeah, and I guess maybe he thinks, at least at this point, that all people are able to be saved, or are worth trying to save at least.
Or that it's not his right to, like, pick and choose, basically.
To decide. Yeah. And then we get to a case of someone has been hit by a car, and Tenma is the one tasked with operating on him. And we find out that the guy who was hit was Adolf Junkers, who is a lockpicker that is being investigated by Lung in connection with a series of murders of elderly couples that have been going on for a while now, in the 9-year period.
Yeah, like elderly couples specifically without children.
Yeah, and Tenma succeeds the operation. The guy's saved, and he tries to talk to him, and Junkers, the only thing he says is the monster is coming. So we get our title drop, kind of, I guess.
Pretty much.
That's episode 3.
Still moving along really fast.
Yeah. You were saying that you didn't expect the time skip when we were talking earlier?
No, I really didn't. I thought it was all going to be a case of, I just didn't expect that the 70-episode anime that we were going to be watching was going to be this tightly paced,
Mm-hmm.
So the 9-year time skip kind of indicates that not everything happens in a serial way in your life. There's going to be gaps where not a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah, but also that 9 years is now 9 years of events they can go back and fill us in on in relation to the mystery. Since there's clearly been stuff happening, these murders have been going on. There's stuff Johan's been doing.
Yeah, it just hasn't been central to Tenma, which is, our protagonist.
Yeah, because we can assume at this point that it's Johan that's been doing them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Or that he's ordering people to do it on his behalf and paying them.
Yeah, and that part doesn't become clear that might be a factor until the last of these episodes, because I forgot that there was the possibility he might be working with a posse or a crew.
It seems like his thing is being completely hands off, as in never actually being at the scene himself.
Yeah.
Always gets rid of people that witnessed him, making sure that nobody remembers who he is, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Was that the next episode that we meet the blind guy, or is that episode 5?
It might be 6, actually. I'm not sure.
Really?
It might be 5 or 6, I can't remember.
I think you're right, it might be 6. No, I think it's 5, but we're not there yet anyway, so. Let's see. Episode 4 is Inspector Lung is interrogating Junkers on the homicides, and he's not getting any response until he asks who hired Junkers to break into places, because Junkers was a lockpicker. And then to that, he starts to have a reaction like Anna had when she was brought into the room with Johan. He starts screaming and crying and just kind of being generally out of control emotionally. And to that, Tenma stops the interrogation and says, okay, we're done here. You come back later if you have more stuff. He needs to calm down now. You're distressing my patient.
kind of feeds into my idea of Lunga being having Asperger's, because he's just not emotionally aware of how much he's distressing the person, you know?
And it's possible he might just not care because he's trying to do his job.
Maybe they're exploring sociopaths in more ways than one, you know?
Maybe.
Like sociopaths on the good side of the law, so to speak.
Yeah, it could be. I never thought of that, but it seems entirely possible.
Well, it's always what they say about people with that sort of brain makeup. They either become a police officer or a criminal, you know?
Mm-hmm. Anyways, after this happens, Tenma takes... Well, Lung places a guard on the room to make sure that nothing happens to Junkers. He doesn't trust Tenma, who is still a prime suspect, in his mind at least. But Tenma takes Junkers out and basically gets him talking and tells him his whole story of how he got into thievery. And Tenma says, confess to the involvement here. You need to let the inspectors do their job and catch the guy who's doing this. He also tells, in the story of how he got into thievery, he talks about a clock, basically a cuckoo clock, with a nutcracker that pops out. And Tenma's out with a colleague. He's going on a blind date, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he sees this clock in a secondhand store window or clock store, some window. And he goes to pick it up and bring it to Junkers. But he goes back to the hospital and finds the police guard dead, and there's a candy wrapper by him, just like the doctor's 9 years ago. He looks out the window and sees Junkers running out towards a construction yard. And when he sees Junkers gone, he drops the clock and we get some of that sound design you were talking about.
Which is hella good.
Anyway, so we get to the construction site, and Junkers is yelling, "Hey, don't come over here. Don't look at him, he'll kill you." And so he gets there. Tenma doesn't listen. And he goes and sees a shadowing man who's saying, "Hey, do you remember me? You saved me 9 years ago. It's because of you that I'm able to do all this stuff." And then he kills Junkers and walks past Tenma, who recognizes him as a grown-up Johan. And in this time, Johan also admits that he's the one who killed all those doctors years ago and killed the police guard.
He did it basically as like a way to thank Tenma in like a really messed up way, because he overheard Tenma when he was saying they would be better off dead.
Yeah.
When he was supposedly unconscious on the hospital bed, but you know, it turns out he was actually completely conscious. He's just a conniving psychopath, and as a way to thank him for saving his life, he just kills all his doctors. So that's how he gets promoted. It's a really interesting angle to take, I think.
Yeah, and then since Junkers and the police guard are dead now, Tenma's back like in the main crosshairs as a suspect for multiple crimes again. So he's heading back towards rock bottom pretty quickly. I thought that this was probably my favorite episode out of these 6. I thought the whole atmosphere for the last sequence, from the blind date, him ditching the blind date all the way through the end, I thought it had a really good pacing, a really good atmosphere to it.
Yeah, like the thing that I keep coming back to is that the show's just really well directed in terms of trying to set the right mood and everything.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of gets that, gives you that like knot in your stomach, like you know some bad shit's gonna happen, or you're actively watching some bad shit.
Yeah, definitely. And the that whole sound design aspect that I keep mentioning kind of feeds into that as well.
Yeah, this was a really, really well done episode. And this is kind of the end of the intro arc for the series. And it kind of, from here, switches out into the main what's going on, what it's going to be like, more or less, for the majority of it, I think. So what do you think about this intro arc?
I think it was fairly tightly told, and not a lot to say about it, I guess, but just that in terms of setting up the plot for a decent thriller, it does the job very well. And, you know, as I mentioned before, like the writing can be a bit exposition-y, but that's probably just a trade-off for the very tight pacing it has.
Yeah, I agree. But let's get into episode 5, I guess, right? We're introduced to a new character, Nina Fortner, who might look kind of familiar.
Kind of.
We see that she's a seemingly pretty good law student, and also she is a good Aikido doer. She's really good at flipping people. She has been having some strange dreams lately about a monster coming to take her, and she gets an email one day from somebody who said that his purpose was to blanket her in flowers, I think.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. Which she takes to be kind of a poetic turn of phrase, as in somebody trying to hit on her. But I took as much more ominous than that. Because,
Yeah.
what do you do with graves?
Oh, I didn't even make that connection.
Yeah, I pretty quickly made that connection.
Yeah, but so her and her friends in class think that it's the quiet kid who's in class that nobody really knows, that's always staring at her, that sent this. That was this episode. No, this is the next episode where I'm getting these two confused. But basically, they arranged a meeting at some point in these next episodes, and she's like, "No, it's not this guy." And then over his shoulder, she gets a glimpse of Johan and passes out.
Has kind of a panic attack or something.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Dr. Tenma is doing his research into these murders of the elderly couples, and comes upon a war veteran of World War II who knew a kid that would always come visit him and ask about the war stories. And he said that he wasn't interested in the stories themselves or the soldier stuff, but more the absolute terror that people were pitted with in the situations. Because the guy was a submarine who was stuck in a crisis situation for like 2 days. And apparently Johan was super interested in their distress. And we also learned that Johan went under a different name now at that point, and has apparently gone under multiple pseudonyms in that 9 years. So we
should sorry to interrupt, but we should mention that in that kind of confrontation Johan and Tenma have, he kind of mentions that Johan isn't his real name either.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of an important plot point.
Yeah, we don't know like who Johan is, what his name is even. It's only Johan because that's how Dr. Tenma knows him.
Pretty much.
But basically, Tenma from there, the veteran says that basically the only reason he thinks that he's still alive is because he's blind and he couldn't see what Johan looked like. It's heavily suspected that was Johan who killed the elderly couple that lived near him, if not straight out knew it.
Oh, he seemed very aware of the fact that kid's a psychopath, basically.
Yeah. I think he straight up called him a monster, right?
I'm not sure, but yeah, I'd have to rewatch it to see, but he seems very aware of it.
Yeah. But Tenma goes to a local newspaper to look for, because he notices that the veteran was only talking about Johan and not about the sister. So he goes to a newspaper to look for news of the twins being somewhere. And then he basically thinks that he kind of isolates where they stopped talking about twins and start talking about Johan. And he thinks that Anna might be in Heidelberg. And then we get to episode 6, where he's still doing research at the newspaper. Was that the EIC? I guess it was, right? Or is it just a journalist?
I think it's just a journalist, but he seemed to be overworking himself or something.
Yeah. But he's kind of reluctant. He thinks Tenma's a crackpot because Tenma told him, like, the whole story, and it sounds like a crazy story. But Tenma starts finding stuff after he's there all night, and the journalist comes around to Tenma's side and starts helping him out. And from there, he discovers that the elderly couple that took Nina in... Nina is at this point... basically know that it's Anna. So
I think it's always supposed to be obvious that it's her, it was not a secret or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but they didn't make the grand reveal until this episode. And we see some of Anna's therapy session she's saying, "Oh, the dreams are gone." But she still has some anxiety, and the therapist seems kind of shitty. He just says stuff like, "Oh, go do sports. Your anxiety will be gone if you do some sports."
It's actually better advice than you would think. Supposedly, exercise is really good for mental health.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. It seemed like he was okay.
No, man. Like if you've got a therapist that says go do exercise for your mental health, he's totally legit advice.
Oh, I didn't know that. Anyway, Dr. Tenma and the newspaper guy go to the Fortners and they're basically like, "Hey, did you take in 2 kids? Because you guys all might be in trouble." Meanwhile, Nina's gotten an email from the mysterious guy who said that he wants to blanket her in flowers and says, "Hey, meet me at the castle at 7 something." So she goes to do that. And the Fortners knew about this and told Tenma about it, so he leaves the newspaper guy to call the cops to try and protect them, while Tenma goes to the castle and finds Nina being accosted, I guess, by a gardener.
Yeah, that's what I'd use.
Yeah, he's trying to keep her there. He said that he told him to keep her there, and he didn't expect... He was told that no one else would be coming, but Tenma's there and throws the gardener off, and Nina uses her martial arts to flip him, and they tie the gardener up and head back to Nina's house, and that's where the episode cuts out. But I'm pretty sure we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen at the beginning of the next episode.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that both the parents and maybe the journalist will be dead as well.
Yep.
Because the phone line in the house for the parents is cut, so it's a very, very thriller moment. People trying to use the phone and it being cut.
Yeah. So in this last episode, we learned that Johan's not above hiring other people. We kind of knew it with Junkers, but we get it, like, for certain that he's not above hiring people to do shit for him. And he keeps very much in the shadows when he does it.
It seems like he kind of picks a certain type of person, from what I could tell. Like, the person that he picked, whether or not that person's a fake gardener or not, I have no idea, but he seems to be a very mentally unstable person.
And it seems like Johan worked through fear, too, because when the gardener was talking about him, they did a zoom up on his face, and the more he talked, like, the more bloodshot his eyes got. Those veins were just creeping towards the center of his eye more as he got more upset talking about Johan.
Yeah, he just seemed to become more fearful as they weren't listening to him, but also in kind of a really unhinged way.
Yeah, but that's these 6 episodes. So, thoughts on the whole grouping?
I think like the first 6 is like definitely a good chunk of time to figure out whether or not the show is for you, basically. I think where the show ends, like where the 6th episode ends, is kind of like a good first act, I guess. And I would recommend going through these first 6 to figure out if you want to stick with the show, but I personally am. And something I think is interesting, because it seems like this is the central idea of the show so far, at least, that, Tenma's all about that each life has equal weight, and his kind of idea of, considering each life as having equal weight is to, like a socioeconomic thing. He's not going to take preference over somebody just because they're more rich or famous or more politically important. He's just going to do proper triage and treat the person who needs to get treated first, But I think this show maybe I'm reaching here, but I think this show being set in Germany isn't a mistake. I think the idea that this show is kind of born from is the whole idea of, what if you were the person that saved Hitler's life, basically,
Kinda, yeah, because Johan is perfect Aryan boy too.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to point that out. He's like the poster child of what an Aryan looks like. Basically, he's this attractive, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed kind of pretty boy, who's like a complete psychopath. So he's basically just a perfect Aryan. And yeah, so I think this kind of idea of that, if you have this very rigid picture of human life being equal, you kind of have to factor in the idea of like evil in that, that sometimes you're going to come across somebody who's evil, and those people's lives are worthless, and they are, those people being alive, the world is worse off for their existence, and it's not a case of that their life is equal. It's kind of like their life detracts from other life around it, and you need to get rid of these people, and then they're a cancer on society, basically.
Yeah.
Psychopaths are bad, man.
Very bad. They make for good fiction.
Well, they certainly do, yeah. They're kind of like real-life monsters, so I guess that's where this title comes from.
Yeah. So where do you think the show's going? Just predictions, guesses.
I really have no idea, really, because there's lots of little details that they're dropping and trying to set up. Like, as I mentioned earlier, that he tells Tenma that his real name isn't Johan, so I'm thinking he was possibly adopted, and that, maybe his sister was adopted along with him as well, with that family. Maybe, maybe this is like really insane, but this is a really out there theory, but perhaps like an Aryan breeding program in the other side of the Berlin Wall, and they kind of stole these children and bring them to the other side of Germany, and that's the reason they defected. That's my insane theory, at least.
It could be, because Nina has the same kind of qualities as Johan.
Except she doesn't seem to be evil. She's very disturbed by Johan's devilry.
Well, yeah. I meant the physical qualities.
But yeah, it's an interesting show, and I think talking about it more through this podcast, I'm starting to have an even more positive impression of the show. It's just nuanced storytelling, very tightly paced, lots of interesting ideas, and it's a very adult show, a very mature show in the sense that, not that it's bloody or that people swear or whatever, it's just this is the storytelling that, as I'm an adult, I appreciate more. And, this is the stuff that I tend to seek out when I'm looking for TV shows or movies or whatever.
What do you think of the art? Because Urasawa's art is pretty non-typical for a Japanese drawn product.
I think it kind of feeds into the, me saying the show's adult, as in the art is also very adult. It just looks like a mature show, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just looks like somebody who's confident in the sort of show they want to make, and confident about, not necessarily pandering to anybody or doing what's popular, just doing what it needs to do in order to tell the story it wants to tell.
Yeah. But anyways, how many episodes do you think per thing? Do you think 4 is maybe good? Better than I thought it would be?
Yeah, 4's a good amount, I think, for each episode.
Okay.
Since it's only a half-hour show, so... Well, it's more like 22 minutes, I think.
So we'll do 7 through 10 next week, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up then. As always, you can send us an email at anime@gamekiwi.net. We're on Twitter and Facebook at the Game Kiwi. We're on youtube.com/the Game Kiwi. That's where all these go up. We have our Let's Plays and stuff. Doder and I are planning on getting a co-op Let's Play started at some point the next few months, hopefully. Once he finds a fucking headset to wear. We're also on podcasts.gamekiwi.net. And that's the place if you want audio-only versions of this stuff and the other podcasts. I just recorded a session of a tabletop thing I'm going to be putting up there at some point. Doder and I recorded a Satoshi Kon thing with Mary Kitsch that I'm slowly working on. But yeah, I think that's about it. If you liked Monster, be sure to stick around with us, because we're gonna be watching all of it.
Seems pretty good so far. I would rate it much more highly than Chihayafuru, that's for damn sure.
But anyways, I'm Mike.
I'm Kat Doda.
Thanks for listening, and as always, keep it anime.